And then later, when I moved to Beijing, I had met Chen Yu earlier, by karmic coincidence, shall we say. And I was looking for him, and I was studying Baguazhang. And when I went to Baguazhang, my teacher was He Jinbao, who's also well known.
Mm-hmm.
And He Jinbao, I was there to translate for a friend of mine. I was not planning on studying anything. My friend didn't speak Chinese, but he had trained with He Jinbao on some workshops in the U.S., and he was going to go train with him in Beijing. So I was like, I'll go along and I'll translate for him, help him out. And it'd be fun. I had nothing to do at the time. So I went with him. And when He Jinbao met us at the gate, he's like, "Oh, who are you and what are you doing here?" I was like, "Oh, I'm his friend and I'm just coming to translate." He's like, You're just here to translate? He's like, "You don't want to train?" I'm like, "Well, I do Taiji Chuan." He's like, "Oh, okay, you do Taiji Chuan. Well, you could do Baguazhang, And I'm like, I don't know. And he said, he said, "Baguazhang will help your Taiji Chuan." Right? And I'm like,
there you go. There you go.
I'm familiar with the situation because here's this guy who's very nice. He's a huge dude too. And very nice. And he's like pushing me to learn from him. And I'm like, why does he want me to learn from him? Why isn't he just saying, "No, get out of here," Or when, you're translating, then sit down and shut up. He's the one training. Why wasn't he mean?
Sure.
This He Jinbao is just a very, very nice guy, very magnanimous. He's a sort of very friendly guy. And he also hates Taiji Chuan. He hates it. So he wanted me to learn.
Come learn Bagua. Yeah.
That's right. It was all very biased. He wanted me to learn Baguazhang to show me how much Taiji Chuan sucked. But anyway, I was, unengaged at the time. So I was like, okay, here's this nice guy who's very good. He wants me to learn Baguazhang. I'll try something new. So I did that. And when I did that, I came with nothing. Yes, I had 6-7 years of Taiji Chuan behind me, but, just start from scratch. It's a different art.
Yeah.
I do whatever he told me to do, and I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I ate there, and I practiced Baguazhang for a while. And then when I finally found Chen Yu again, when I went back to Chen Yu, I explained who I was. He knew Jean Chen. They knew each other. Because Jean had been around in Chen village and he'd been around his father. So he knew Chen Yu when he was little. And he knew who he was. Didn't like him very much. Chen Yu did not like Jean Chen. So I arrived with a blemish, you learn from that guy.
Right.
Jean, as I said, Jean had gone all around China, bribing teachers to learn and, he was like a player, you know what I mean? He knew how to play the game and he could grease the palms and get into things, and when he was in Chen village, he went to, Chen FaKe's old house, where Chen Yuxia, the daughter, she might have still been living there. I don't know. Maybe she was probably in Beijing, but the family house, he went to the family house in the village and they let him in. They talked to him. He had tea with them. And he was asking about Chen FaKe, and they said, "Oh yeah." And they went under the bed. They pulled out Chen FaKe's sword, which was, I believe it was a lady's sword that was a short sword, and it was broken, but it belonged to Chen FaKe, and it was under the bed. It was like rusted and neglected, And they pulled that out to show to him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I'll give you X amount of money for it." He wanted to buy it. Right? I'll conserve it and protect it. And, he wanted to buy it. That's the kind of guy he was. And so when I met Chen Yu, he's like, you do Chen Taiji Chuan. Is that, you practice? I said, yeah. I learned from someone named Chen Jinghong. Okay. I didn't know it was Chen Yu at the time that I was talking to. I didn't recognize him. And yeah, I met him in the park and he was just, a guy wearing a blazer and dress shoes on the dirt, and leaning against a pole. And he's like, you practice? Cause I met him. I was looking for Feng ZhiQiang. I was lost in the park. I said, "Do you know where Feng ZhiQiang is?" And he's, "Oh yeah. He's right here. This is his class right here. Just hang around for a bit." It wasn't. It was his class. Feng ZhiQiang was on the other side of the park. He was just bullshitting me to keep me there because he was mad at Feng ZhiQiang at the time. They had a bit of an argument at that moment. So he was like, "Oh, somebody's looking for Feng ZhiQiang. Oh, yeah, you're right here. Feng ZhiQiang's here. Hang out for a while. He'll be back." So I'm hanging around.
my
He's
goodness.
like, you practice Taiji Chan, you know? I'm like, yeah, I learned in the U.S.A. Yeah, who did you learn from? His name is Chen Jinghong. And he's like, and his eyebrow went up. Chen Jinghong. 我认识他，我知道他. That means I know him. I know who that is. He goes, 他要买我家里的剑, you know. He wanted to buy my family sword. That asshole, you know. He's like a cheapskate.
Yeah.
You know? This guy came to our house and tried to buy my grandfather's sword. I know what kind of guy he is. He's like a rip-off guy, you know. And so I came in there with a black mark on me, you know. But then later, of course, I was late for Feng ZhiQiang's class because he kept me there to have me like chatting with him and watching his class until finally I was like, oh, this isn't his class at all, is it? He's like, of course not, you know, and told one of the students to take me over to Feng ZhiQiang's class. And then I went to Feng ZhiQiang's class and said, oh, I'm sorry, you know, I'm sorry, teacher, I was late. I was over there I met Chen Yu. Chen Yu, you know, then he got pissed off because, of course, the two of them are arguing. And he's like, you're over there talking with Chen Yu, and that's why.
God.
Why don't you go learn from Chen Yu? If you like Chen Yu so much, go over there and learn from Chen Yu, you know? I was like, oh, sorry, you know? And, you know, I started, and then I was there with a black mark. I was black mark in both directions. But,
man,
when I found Chen Yu again and went to learn from him, you know, I had been practicing Chen Jinghong stuff and Feng ZhiQiang stuff and some Bagua. And when I went to Chen Yu, I was like, whatever, I do nothing. And I just do exactly what you tell me to do. I was a good boy. I did everything I was supposed to do. And I started from nothing, from basics. And I was smart enough. I might have been stupid in some ways, but I was smart enough, you know, if he's teaching me Jinggang Dao Dui for, you know, the second move of the form, I was smart enough not to say, but so-and-so taught me to do it this way. Why is it different? That's the first one, you know, that people do. But I thought it was like this. I didn't think it was like anything because I figured I had just won the lottery and hit the jackpot to end up at Chen Yu's, you know, courtyard anyway. So whatever you tell me to do, I am the yes man. I will do whatever it is because I have found Chen Zhaokui's son. So I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do. And I started from scratch and started all over again. So the answer to your question is, did I start over every time I met one of these new teachers? Yes. I started over 300%. I was willing to throw everything away. And it's not easy to do. But, you know, and then for a while in the very beginning, I was practicing Chen Jinghong stuff, Feng ZhiQiang stuff, Bagua, and Chen Yu stuff. And after a few months, after I had enough material, I was like, it wasn't just enough material. I had enough material to practice for a significant amount of time in Chen Yu's curriculum. And then when the structure started to build from doing that, it cannibalized everything else. So everything else I had been practicing along with that and everything else I had been practicing before was pretty suddenly meaningless because Chen Yu's structural architecture was so detailed. And having that detailed architecture was so impactful in terms of what you would build physically that it was like I realized everything else was just vacuous. It was like empty. It was not located in space. And this was like a hard structure that was just much more profound than anything else I had learned. And it was burning the absolute shit out of my legs. And nothing else was. So I realized that this was just, I at that point, I tossed everything. I tossed everything aside and only did that. And I've been doing that for decades. So that's the answer to your question. Now you can go on after that long-winded talk.
That was awesome. That was the question of questions. I only have one more for you. So,
let me go.
It sounds like
you've been asking all the questions. Let me go.
The poor guy. Okay. Go ahead.
So I was gonna ask. You know,
well, I'm teasing. Maybe he finish up and then you go. That's fine too, right?
No, sometimes I got to duke it out with this guy. You know?
You guys knock each other out. I'm gonna watch while you fight. Wait. But before we do that, who's practicing what style? I want to know who's superior.
Oh yeah, no styles. It's the style of no style.
The Wing Chun guy over here.
Okay, Wing Chun. The other guys probably like Sistema. Sorry, you lose. I'm kidding.
So I was going to ask, in terms of like each one of your teachers, whether it was Jean or whether it was Feng or finally Chen Yu, I know that you've had an opportunity to do Tuisho and do push hands and those sorts of things with them. And I was wondering qualitatively if there was a difference between the three. I mean, I'm sure there is developmentally, and there you met them at different stages of their own development, but what it was the difference between them, if you can articulate that, and then how does that impact you? Like what sort of which one of those people or qualities do you bring out in your own practice after decades?
That's a very interesting question, and I'm gonna. Have you written that question down?
No, I just sort of came up with it while we were talking.
I'm gonna ask the two of you to hold the different aspects of that question for me, because I'm gonna miss them. I'm gonna need to be reminded. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the first part of the question, because it's kind of a long question. The first part is how were they qualitatively different in terms of Tuisho and that type of stuff?
Uh-huh. Yes.
Okay. So, all right. So I'm just going, when I go back historically and I talk about Jin Chen and then Feng ZhiQiang and then Chen Yu, I first want to explain that the journey and these people and the stories are very important for my development, but I go forward only myself. And the fact of the matter is that since I became a disciple of Chen Yu, that's been it. And that's what I work on. So I'm talking about the past because I think it's quite interesting. And I think that in terms of my personal story, those things are important so that people understand how I came, not how I found the art with Chen Yu, but what I brought to it. So it helps put in perspective how I was able to understand what I learned from him. That's the important part. Okay. But we can get back to that. But specifically Chen Jinghong, his approach, he started out in Southern Mantis. So he was very facile in striking. Southern Mantis is a striking art. It is not a throwing art. Yep. Okay. Yep. Southern Mantis is going to be a lot closer to something like Wing Chun than, it is a Southern white crane derived art, which is all of those Southern arts, Wing Chun, the crane arts, Charlie Foot and all these arts they're all related to white crane one way or another, white eyebrow, all these things, they all share a slightly pigeon-toed, diagonal, slightly short stance. And they all versions of this, crane hands and done in different ways on different, delivery platforms. Okay. So Southern Mantis was very much a striking art in the white crane paradigm. All right. With a short ging, what they call, the same thing you find in all the Southern arts, which they used to translate, they say, oh, this translates to jing in Taiji. Well, it doesn't. It's a different usage of the word, but I mean, it's a different meaning in a subtle way. But in any case, so he was very facile in striking. He was a hitter, and Southern Mantis is an art that has no play. So it's not a nice art. It's an art that is not nice to you physically. Like Jean stopped teaching it for two reasons. He transitioned to Taiji. He stopped teaching it for two reasons. Three reasons. Number one reason, he said, it's bad for your posture because you hunch over, you hunch the back. You have a round back, to create the power. Yep. Okay. And he said, this is great for like fighting, but over the long term, it's pretty damn rough on the body. And it is. I agree with that. I at my age, I would not want to be doing it. But people love it. People like to fight. It's a great fighting art. The second reason is that Southern Mantis only wants to kill. Right. It's like designed to just kill people. So, when you hit people, you want to maim or murder. You just, the strikes are just very, it's very malicious, is designed to really hurt you. And although they do have drills, it's not like you can really spar without really hurting each other. It's like all your strikes are, the Phoenix Eye Fist and all, they're just designed to poke a hole in your brain, So it's very unforgiving in terms of partner practice. You can't have a lot of fun with it. You can be very aggressive, but it's like, if you compare that to something like Tuisho or Qisao, you know what I mean? You can have a lot of fun with Qisao or Tuisho you don't even have to hit each other. And you can do,
yes,
or even like something like wrestling or grappling or whatever. You can do those things without hurting each other. You can do a lot of martial arts without beating the absolute crap out of each other. But Zhuge, that art is like, it's pretty hard knocks, and they don't have, like a lot of other arts, they don't have a curriculum which is designed around play, which Taiji is. Taiji is really. Although it's Tuisho and it can be very rough, it's very playful. You learn by play, and you can go to varying degrees of resistance, and you don't have to be super aggressive. There's a lot to be learned without being aggressive. So the Zhuge is very, very aggressive. It's very hostile, and it's just very violent in terms of its striking methods. So there's not much of a middle ground. It's just an on-off switch. And he thought, well, that's not good. It's more fun if you can do something that doesn't beat the crap out of each other. And then the third point is, because the Zhuge is so aggressive, the more you practice it, it makes you hostile as a person, because you're always thinking about, kill, 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 advance, advance, advance.
Yeah.
And you become, it's just, he said it was bad mentally, it psychologically made you aggressive. I think there's probably truth to that. I think what you practice determines how you are. I think that's true for a lot of Wing Chun schools in the U.S. I'm not a Wing Chun expert, so I can't speak to it on the whole, but I'm just saying the vast American perception of Wing Chun, to some degree probably coming from Bruce Lee and his sort of arrogant personality, is that a lot of, they like to say Wing Chun was, designed by a woman or taught by a woman or all this kind of stuff. And it's unclear whether those stories are really true. There's a lot of things that don't make sense. They say, oh, Wing Chun closes its legs because it's designed for a woman. But why? Because it's really men who would want to be closing their legs, Men are the ones who don't want to get kicked in the crotch. Women are kind of just like, ouch.
That's right.
It's not the same. So as I've talked to some students about a few months ago or whatever, Wing Chun, maybe the stance, they close their feet and they close their knees, not because it's for a woman. They close their knees and they close their feet because it's a white crane art. And they all do that because that's how you get dynamic tension in the stance. Okay. That's their particular innovation, to go heels out and push out in resistance against the outside of the feet. Okay. With spiral power in the legs. Okay. That's why they do it. They don't close their knees because she was a woman. Women are the least likely to give a shit if they get hit. Okay. In that area. The difference with Wing Chun, if it was designed for or by a woman, it's not why they close their feet. It's why the stance is short. Because women would have worn a long robe. They're not allowed to show their legs. So they would have had to cover up. So their footwork has to be short. You understand? White crane or batme, but white eyebrow, the stance is long because it's men. Because who gives a shit if you see their ugly, hairy knees, But women are not supposed to be showing their thighs. Someone wants to kill you and you're like, oh, look at my leg. That doesn't work culturally. Women had to cover up. So if Wing Chun was made for a woman or designed by the female monk, it's designed to cover the legs and have a short stance. Okay. Anyway, that's a side point. But the adoption of Wing Chun into the American psyche, right, goes along with Bruce Lee. And even though people say, oh, this art might have been, designed for or by a woman, so it's a soft and delicate, blah, 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 blah. Most of the schools that teach Wing Chun accept and encourage very macho, aggressive men.
Yeah.
I've crossed hands with a lot of Wing Chun people and a lot of Wing Chun schools, and they, by and large, this isn't you, there's lots of schools that aren't like it, but in the U.S. and in Europe, there's a lot of schools where it's like, oh, this is it's a soft art. I'm going to go build as much muscle as I can. You see all those Wing Chun guys who are just like, really built, right? And they're like, look, we have a soft art. It's even partially internal. Now let me get on steroids, lift as much weights as I can and bash your face in, It's a bit of a cognitive dissonance where it's like, if it's a softer art and it's a feminine art, why are you masculinizing it to that degree? Why do you need that? If it functions so well as a scientific and sort of softer, an art that follows yin yang softness more than some of those other arts, why do you need all that muscle to do it? Right? It's quite an interesting idea. I just crossed hands with a lot of really muscle-bound Wing Chun people, and you see the attitudes of people like, what's his name, Eamon Bustepi or whatever. Those European guys are just like, tough, I'm going to go kick your ass. Very violent, very aggressive, very macho. You know what I mean? And then you look at the pictures of like Ip Man, for example, and the guy is like very skinny, very feminine, and maybe he really was that good. I'm not saying he wasn't. He very well could have been. If he was really that good, he sure as hell wasn't using a whole bunch of muscle to do it because he didn't have it.
That's right.
Not a big guy. Okay. And this relates to Baguazhang as well. People talk about Baguazhang, and the popular Baguazhang in the West is Cheng style Baguazhang, right? It was for a long time. And Chen Tinghua was a big, burly, fat dude who was a shuaijiao guy. He was a wrestler. So Dong Haichan taught him whatever he did before it was called Baguazhang. He taught him, here's what you can do that works with the wrestling you already know and with your body type, which is heavy and good for wrestling. And that's what became popularized. But, Dong Haichan's top disciple was not Chen Tinghua. Chen Tinghua was not a long-term disciple. The top disciple, the long-term disciple was Yin Fu. Yin Fu, they used to call him Shou Yin. Thin Yin. Yeah. Okay? He was He looked like Ip Man, okay? So there must be something in Baguazhang, that does not require all that brawn to get over. All right. Anyway, that's my little treatise on Wing Chun. But he had done Southern Mantis. He had crossed hands with a lot of Wing Chun people. He was involved with the Chinatown folks who didn't like him very much. They called him a northerner. And he was a little bit arrogant and very aggressive by nature. He was a fighter by nature. He had come up in a very hostile art, very aggressive art, and he had made a habit before he was even teaching Taiji Chuan. He had made a habit of going all over Chinatown in San Francisco and going to the Wing Chun classes and the other classes, whatever classes, and he'd walk in the door and say, I'm a new student, I want to learn martial arts. Please teach me. And they'd be teaching him. He'd stay there for a month or so, and then he'd say, can you teach me some applications? Can I learn some Chisao? Can I, and he would start bugging people until they start teaching him, cross hands with him. And then they'd cross hands with him and he'd beat the shit out of them.
That was good.
No, it's not. But I mean, people evolve, so they tell me. But, I'm not saying he beat the shit out of them, but he would humiliate them. And it was like a half and half prospect where on one side, he was doing it for his own ego. He wanted to beat people and show them that he was better. And on the other side, he was also a purist, and he resented the fact that people were self-promoting themselves as better than they were or teaching bullshit or whatever. So he would kind of go around and knock people off, Think of it as a self-serving public service. You know what I mean? So he was pleasing himself while he was also cutting out the chaff in the crop. Okay? And so he got a reputation for doing that, and people didn't like him. But when I met him, he was older, and he wasn't doing that, and he was teaching Taiji. But he had been through that, and he was someone who had thought. And so at the same time, he had a long background with Yang style Taiji and Wu style Taiji. So I will say this. His approach was that in Tuisho, he was very soft. He was feather light. And he was into that. He could teach that. He could teach you where you could not be detected because he'd come through Yang style and Wu style, right? But then he also came through Chen style. So he was very into Qinna joint locking and spirals and throwing. He had very good throwing methods. But then he had all this striking stuff that he had from Southern arts.
Yeah.
Taiji Chuan has great striking, but good luck getting someone to teach you that. Taiji Chuan has, okay, hold on 1 second, okay? Hold on 1 second. Okay. So, Taiji Chuan has great striking, but, good luck teaching that. That is something that has faded out of popularity. And over many decades, or even some hundreds of years, that has been, downplayed for a number of reasons. The vast majority, and I'm talking about 99.99999% of people out there don't know the striking for Taiji Chuan. Okay. They can make some things up, but they haven't learned it. And it's pretty hard to learn now. Most people are focused on Tuisho, and some throwing, some joint locking. But the actual fighting component is something that's it hasn't been needed for a while. You know what I mean? And having not been needed for a while, things start to degrade. Use it or lose it.
Yeah.
Wing Chun, by contrast, is only striking. And I'm going to potentially insult people and say that Wing Chun is not good at throwing by a throwing arts viewpoint. Shuai Jiao, Taiji Chuan would look at Wing Chun and say, no, they don't have throwing. They can invent a few things, but it's not we don't acknowledge that. It's not impressive. Wing Chun has kicking. It has low kicking. But, from a Taekwondo guy's standpoint, they say Wing Chun doesn't have kicking. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Taiji Chuan has kicking. Taiji Chuan has kicking. But the Thai boxers would look at Taiji Chuan and say, Taiji Chuan doesn't have kicking. I can even say Taiji Chuan has ground fighting, but the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu would say, you don't have ground fighting. Okay. So, arts, they do have their preferences and they do have their specializations. And some of that is due to the art itself, and other aspects of that are due to history, the course of history. And, who knows what Bat Mei or Wing Chun looked like 300 years ago. Did they have throwing? I don't know. Taiji Chuan definitely had striking, and, it still exists, but it's very, very hard to find. I had some of my teachers actually taught that. Well, let's say all of my teachers taught that, but to varying degrees, they wanted to keep it close to the vest. So, anyway, before I get too far off track, so Jin Chen was really good at striking. Okay, he brought that with him from Southern arts, and then he went and studied Yang style and Wu style Taiji, and he had a very, very soft touch from learning their Tuisho methods. Okay, and between the two of them, Wu style is really good in terms of the technology for from Tuisho to striking. Yang style lost that. The Yang style people are going to get mad that I said that, but they lost that. Wu style is a small frame Yang style, and they preserved that. Okay, we can talk about that more in depth later or at another time. But the Tuisho technology that maps out a path from Tuisho to Sanshou, right? From push hand to striking exists in Wu style Taiji Chuan, but not in Yang style. It is gone. They're not going to want to hear it, and they're going to be annoyed, but there's a science behind this, and there's a factual history. Okay. The small frame Yang style, which is Wu style, preserved that. Okay. Everything comes at a cost though. And the Wu style, although they preserved the path from Tuisho to Sanshou, they lost the throwing. And they don't have the actual striking, which is to say they have the path, but they don't have the power. Okay? So because a small frame, you can't throw like that in small frame, and you don't have a low stand, so you can't support the weight. Okay? We can get into all this later, but for example, if you look at throwing arts like judo has no low stance, right? They throw from high stance, but they use the gi,
yes,
and they trip to throw. Okay? If you're talking about no gi throwing, right, and throwing from striking, you'll need to be able to sit down. If you're throwing them over your leg and then following them down to the ground, that means you have a path from striking, locking, throwing and submitting. And I mean that, submitting, same as ground fighting. Okay? That's the path. Hitting, locking, throwing, and submitting or maiming. Okay? To have that path, if you want to follow them to the ground and control them when you put them down, you have to be able to sit down low. Because your leg is the bench, they're going to fall over. And when they're on the ground, you have to be able to reach them. Doesn't happen from standing up. That's why Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, when they want to throw you, they grab you, jump on you like a monkey, and fall and pull you with them. So they can deal with you on the ground because they are on the ground. But Taiji Chuan has ground methods. They just don't get on the ground with you. You're on the ground, and I'm standing. Okay? So that's one of the reasons you have low stances. That's one of them. There's a lot of other reasons. Okay? But Wu style doesn't have the long stance. They don't have the low stance. And they don't have the power generation. So they have some leftover technology to how to get from, Tuishou to Sanshou, right? They're mapped in there. The roots are mapped in there. But it's like studying history, it's like a fossil. Because the actual bashing people's face in, that power doesn't exist in the Wu style structure. Okay? You can reach out and hit somebody from a high stance, absolutely. But it's the spiral power and the waist and all that kind of stuff, which you find in Chen style Taiji Chuan, which is the history of that power generation. So, and people, they get mad when you say this stuff. I get it. Nobody wants to be, have some critical, humiliating view made about them. But the thing is, you just look at the public action out there. And what happened was Yang style was the most famous. Wu style was kind of on the fringe. And then Chen style came out and everybody's like, oh my God, there's actual real martial arts in Taiji Chuan. Everybody said that. Even Yang style, Wu style, oh my God. That's what happened. That's why when they had that famous meeting with that guy Wu Tunan and said, they said, Taiji is 13 postures. They're talking to Chen FaKe. They said, Taiji is 13 postures. That's the definition of Taiji. So if you're Taiji, if you don't have 13 postures, how can we call what you do Taiji? And Chen FaKe said, Taiji's 13 postures, is it? Okay. I guess we're not Taiji. Because he didn't care about the name at all.
Right.
And, and what happened after that time period is you see that all these other arts, whether it's Wu style or Yang style specifically, or what they invented, which is Wudang Taiji Chuan, which never existed, was never a thing. They made Wudang Taiji Chuan in the 1980s, and Wudang, the temples, they never had any martial arts at all. They're Taoist temples. They weren't martial arts. It was the books, it was the fantastical stories that attributed, Taoist martial arts. They don't have any history of martial arts there. So they created Wudang Taiji Chuan, which is Yang style Taiji Chuan with what? Chen style spiral and power. That's what they did. They said, and then you had all those Yang style people who came out and said, oh, we're practicing the secret style of Yang Shao Hao or whatever, or whoever it is, whatever secret style from whatever teacher. And they said, look at this. It has spiral power, right? It has low stance. Well, that's telling you the story. Everybody wanted to get what Chen style came out with and showed. Everybody wanted a piece of that. Say, we lost. They're not going to admit we lost that, but when it came out that we want some of that, and they're starting to put that into their styles. And now you see all those people saying we practice the old Yang style, and they show the low frame. And to be honest, that is the history of Yang style. I'm not saying they didn't have that. They did have it, but they lost it. That it's not like big news here. This was the history of your style, right? One of the sons of the family, he ran away to try and kill himself, right? Because his dad made him practice under the table.
Yep.
That means he practiced what we call 四平马. 四平马 means 4 even level stance, okay? So your thighs are level to the ground. That's our stance. That's a bitter stance. It's miserable, okay? So the kid couldn't take it. His dad made him do it every day. He's just screaming in pain. Screw this, I'm out of here. Let me kill myself, okay? That's the history of Yang style. Because the history of Yang style is Chen style. That's what they were. Yang Chen is 18 years in Chen village. That's not an accident. Okay? So Yang style is Chen style that, sat on the couch for a while. Yang style is Chen style that went on the beer and ice cream diet and watched the Home Shopping Network. That's it. You guys want to get back your former glory? I support you. Okay? Just as long as we acknowledge history. That's what all the styles came from. They all came from that Chen origin, low stance, spiral power, bitter legs, and beating the absolute shit out of your opponent. That's what it came from. Okay, it didn't come from soft styles for old people, soft and smooth yin yang philosophy. That's not what it came from. It employs that stuff, but that's not the legacy. Okay, and the Yang style legacy is the same as the Chen style legacy, and so is the Wu style. The difference is Wu style gave up the stance. Yang style gave up the stance to some degree, but they also gave up a spiral, they gave up power, joint locks, all this kind of stuff. That is the unfortunate history of the path of martial arts as it goes forward. That's what happened. So, like I said, Wu style has this map that gets you from Tuishu to Sanshou, okay? Mm-hmm. But they don't have wrestling. They don't have really much of it's not a surviving curriculum of throwing, not a surviving curriculum of joint locking, and not a surviving curriculum of basically bashing people's face in and breaking their joints, okay? It's like the hitting art is lost, the power of that art is lost. The spiral power for the joint locks and the throws is lost, okay? But it's a cool art. I'm not knocking it. Wu style has some great hand methods, okay? Yang style lost all the same stuff, but they preserved the big frame, which some of the things that Wu style needs is in that big frame, okay? Mm. Chen style itself lost things, what you see in the softness you see in Yang style Taiji Chuan. The path from Sanshou to hitting that you see in Wu style Taiji Chuan. These things are faded out over time in Chen style Taiji Chuan on the whole. That's why you see the vast majority, I'm not saying everybody, but the vast majority of people in Chen style Taiji Chuan will eventually just revert to just Tuishu, right? And in that they will revert to competition Tuishu, which becomes rather brute force wrestling, okay? Which is also not the original style. Sorry, honey, it's not. That stuff you see in the competitions is sanda and judo, okay? Adapted for no gi, and how can we make it look like taiji? They brought in the instructors from Shuaijiao, from Sanda. They brought in the instructors in Chen Village. That's the history. So that competition stuff, it can be made to relate to Taiji, okay? But that's not the origin. And, it's the origin itself is problematic. The origin does not play well in competition. The origin is break your bones, break your face. So it doesn't play well in competitions. Everybody's lost something. And the map from Tuishu to Sanshou in Chen Taiji Chuan is also obscured because Tuishu, first of all, is obscured in much of Chen Taiji Chuan because it becomes competition, right? It becomes like a brute force body hefting, body to body, just lift somebody's body over, quick change, trip them over, trip their foot and throw them. And the number of things you could do is extremely limited in that format. It's basically like sumo. You can grab the guy's belt, you can go body to body, very much like sumo. Now, I happen to like sumo a whole lot. In fact, I like sumo better than competition Tuishu to watch. It's much more interesting because sumo, they can hit each other in the face. Yeah. So competition Tuishu has all these rules. Can't touch this, can't do that. Well, sumo doesn't have that many rules. Sumo, you can grab whatever you want. Their cock and balls are not exposed. You just grab their belt, but you grab everything else and you can mash your hand into their face. You're not punching them with a fist, but there's no area of the body that you can't push on. Okay? You can just glom yourself onto any area of the body. So it makes it much more realistic in terms of just how force works. Because the sumo guys can charge out of their corner and go at it and immediately face plant the guy with their palm and then proceed to throw him on his ass. Okay? In Tuishu, you can't do that. Yes. In Tuishu, you can't even put your hand, competition Tuishu, you can't even put your hand on his neck. I mean, for me, I'm like, can you imagine? But I can't say that because everybody already does imagine. Yeah, of course you can't do that. It's a terrible thing to do. Why would you ever do it? Me, I do it every day. You can't put your hand on your neck. Therefore, nobody ever puts a hand on the shoulder because it always slides to the neck. Right? So sumo was already more realistic. Okay, when it comes to force. As soon as the head is out of the game, there's not a whole lot of game to be had. Then you're grabbing the body like it's like you're lifting a moving box or something. So the competition Tuishu is its own thing, okay? But the original curriculum for Tai Chi Chuan is not that like grab the body and heft people around. It's, as a martial artist, there's a whole range of things here, which is like, number one, don't get hit. Number two, don't get stabbed. Number three, don't get your joints broken. All of these things fit into the area of don't let them into your body, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you coming from a Wing Chun perspective, it's like he punches Tan Sao, Bong Sao. That's out here, right? That's outside the elbow.
Yes.
Outside the elbow gate.
Yes.
Right? That's the forearm gate. What we would call the wrist gate. Okay? So you're outside here. So that if you have those butterfly knives, I'm out here with them, right? You have them, I have them, we're out here. We're not playing Tuisho with butterfly knives, you know what I mean? You have blades. There's no, that's right. That's right. He's holding up the knives. There's no, what they would call butterfly, there's no like, push blades. I mean, yeah, you can have that, but
that's right.
It's at a distance because the blades aren't safe. Well, in martial arts, my hands are also not safe. So if my hands are on your body in the range of your face or your throat, you're in a bad way when it comes to martial arts or self-defense. So Tuisho is an agreement. It's a gentleman's agreement to say, we are going to play here where you have contact. We're allowing contact, which says if I'm allowing you to put your hands on me and I'm putting my hands on you, that implicitly says there's no hitting, right? Because you've already crossed the forearm gate, right? And in real self-defense or martial arts, we start at no contact, and if we have contact, it's going to move on to the wrist gate. And if I make contact with you at the wrist gate, I'm hitting you immediately. You know what I mean? I will redirect, evade, and hit you immediately. I will not let you get to the wrist gate and then say, please come into the, liver gate. I'm not going to let you reach into
That's right.
You know what I mean? If I was protecting myself, you're out here and then I'm hitting you and you're thrown. I'm not allowing you to walk in and then try to solve the problem after. No. So Tuisho is an agreement. It is a drill. It is a game. All right. And it's an agreement that excludes hitting. So as a result, people don't hit in Tuisho, which is fine. But when it comes to competition, the problem is Tuisho doesn't stop at any gate. That competition is body to body. That's a wrestling competition. Without you can't push even the head. You have to stay away from the rest of the body. So it becomes very limited. It's like judo, but it's no gi, and it's very, well, I think it's probably very challenging, but it's sort of like a strength art. You must have a lot of core strength and arm strength to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
And the techniques that survive the rules are not particularly the techniques of the Tai Chi Chuan legacy, right? Which would be softness, using opponent's force against them, manipulating the opponent's psychology, following, yin-yang disparity with spirals and force and all. That's not happening. You can watch those competitions. You get a couple quick trick throws and footwork changes and quick I threw you. And yeah, you can make them hit empty and fall, but it's still body to body and arms aren't involved. They can just grab and heft, but it's a lot of strength needed. Wrestling does exist in the history of Chen Village and the Chen family, but that's not the big legacy of the style, wrestling. That's something that became popularized after the 1980s because China needed a way to publicize their national arts, right? And you can't go out there and be breaking people's noses to do it. So they made something civil and palatable. All right? But anyway, I don't practice that, so I'm just talking about it. But getting back to your question, so Gene was very good at striking. He grew up on a diet of striking, so that was his platform. And then he went and did Tuisho, and his Tuisho was very soft and very detailed, and was very much into the science and the philosophy of leading opponent to emptiness and the different weighted difference between yin and yang aspects of any particular position or shape, and how you can manipulate a person's action with spiral and how you lead them and all this kind of stuff. And that was very educational. It was very good. So doing Tuisho with him felt bad because you didn't know where you were. When you touch, it was, oh shit. It was kind of like,
ooh, yeah.
You kind of didn't know where you were and he was about to hit you. You know what I mean? You kind of didn't know where you were until suddenly he would lock you. But I was also, 25 years old or whatever, 26 years old, and he he was, 60 or whatever he was, and he was kind of fat. He was big and heavy, and I wasn't like challenging him with Tuisho, and he wasn't someone that you would challenge anyway. Like, so I was a student, so whatever he taught, I did, and I did get to Tuisho with him a little bit, and it was very instructive, but, more than a little bit, but I mean, it wasn't like every day I was like, oh, let me go Tuisho with Gene, he was the teacher. It was like, I did Tuisho with a lot of students, and then he'd come around and teach. I got to touch hands with him here and there, and to feel the feeling, and it was very useful. But I wasn't like, let me go at it with Gene. Let me see who's better. Yeah, no, he was a teacher, and I was a kid, and if I had ever gone at it, he would have broke my jaw. I mean, he was very fast.
Yeah.
So he was a guy who didn't play around because he'd been through it. So if you went to Tuisho with him, if you gave him a problem, he would have took you out. He wasn't playing that. He was used to just taking people out. So it's like you could play with him if you're like cooperating, as a student, but you're going to try to cause trouble. He's going to like make you suffer. And so we didn't do that. We just kind of were there to learn. But he was a great striker, and he had a lot of good joint locks and good footwork, and a lot of really interesting scientific methods about applications. Feng ZhiQiang was, in some way, yes, when Bruce Francis said he was the ocean, he was. He was the big ocean. Feng ZhiQiang was a guy, I got to learn from him, and I got to touch hands with him on occasion. And Tuisho with him was like, he was very, very relaxed. And I don't mean like, fang song, like relax in Taichuan. I mean, he was a guy that was relaxed due to confidence. So he was, if you touch hands with him, he was like very heavy, but not because he was putting strength on you. He was very heavy because he was just hanging, very relaxed. And then in his mind, he was just expansive. So whatever you push into, he wasn't particularly nervous about it. He would let you come in wherever you wanted. He'd let you do whatever you want. He's like, oh, okay. And then you're messed up. Once you get in there, it's like, oh shit, I didn't want to go. No, I didn't want to go in here. And he was also like, he had been a machinist, and it's also just his genetics. His chest is really big, and he has what they call, garden pail hands. His hands and fists are really big. His fingers were like sausages, just really big. So, he was really soft and rolling when it came to Tuisho. So it really was like the ocean. It was like this vacuous place where you really wish you hadn't gone into. And then on the other hand, he was a great hitter. And he was known in the Beijing circles as being one of the few Taiji guys who could actually fight. And so he also taught striking. It was like not fun to learn. Because, he would teach you about hitting limbs. He would make you hit him. You'd hit him and he'd beat the shit out of your arms. And he'd talk about, hitting bones. For him, it was like, hit your bones. Yeah, he'd hit your bones. Wow. He could, and he was in his 70s when I learned from him, so he wasn't really trying to go rough or anything, but he had a lot of hitting technique behind him, and it was like what we called za, or smashing. He believed in long range hitting for Taichuan. So he was like, he's like long range, he could smash you, and then, come in for Tuisho, and he just like, you feel like you got him. You won the worst lottery ever, He's gonna twist you up, lock you, and throw you, But he was also in his 70s, and, I wasn't Feng ZhiQiang's disciple. I was the student of his disciple. So I had a limited amount of time with him, which was very important and very formative. But I can't say I was like absorbed, decades of his style. I was there for X number of years on and off, and it was very important for me. But I had other things going on too. And, I took everything I could from that. Also knowing that it's like, in the long run, I probably wasn't, it didn't end up, but I was going to go that way. Because he was too old for one and other reasons. Now I'll take a side trip to Baguazhang. That's a different art. That's a totally different art. And yin style Baguazhang is striking. That's a hitting art. Okay. Now, people will tell you Baguazhang's all about footwork. And yes, it is. It's all about footwork, but it's a striking art. Now, if you look at Cheng Tinghua, they'll tell you it's a throwing art. That's because they don't know the striking. They don't know the striking side. So, that's what they do.
Sure.
Okay. And that's all fine. But the original art with the longest disciple, Yinfu, that's a striking art. And they are great at hitting obliquely. So the delivery system for Baguazhang being circular and all that, it's all about walking around to get the oblique angles. Okay. The not only oblique, but the blinded angles. Right? The angles where nobody looks because nobody goes there. So they're good at hitting on those angles. They hit from weird positions at weird angles. And it's hard to deal with. And He Jianbao specifically, his power is excellent. I will say that, I did my time in that training, but I had already been doing Taiji Chuan for a long time, and the stance structure of Baguazhang did not hook me, did not compel me. The stance structure, the connection from foot to hand in Taiji Chuan is utterly different from foot to hand in Baguazhang. Okay, so as I tell my students when they ask this question, Baguazhang in general. And I'll just say, no matter what people protest, Baguazhang is an art that is top-heavy by Taiji Chuan standards. Because, and this is not like He Jianbao himself said, Taiji Chuan is about the center, and moving from the center and all this kind of thing. He said, Baguazhang is the center, like center of the universe. But, Baguazhang is the center, meaning it spins on the axis or walks around the axis. Okay, you either are the axis spinning or you're walking around the axis. Okay, and the opponent is the axis. Okay, but it's about twisting yourself on the pole of the axis. That's twisting, right? You have a position and you twist your body around your feet. And it's twisting all the way up. All right, and by that arrangement, from the Taiji Chuan perspective, it is top heavy. Okay. So even by He Jianbao standards, he would say, there's a number of different ways that so-called internal arts will manifest. We have this kind of art, that kind of art. And he says, basically, Taiji Chuan and even Xingyi Chuan are what they call sinking art, Xiachen arts, okay, where they sink. And they derive their power from sinking into the ground and sinking to the leg. He said Baguazhang is not a sinking art. And he's absolutely right. Baguazhang is not a sinking art. It is what I call a spinning top art. So it's top heavy and you're spinning. And the points at which you are connected to the ground are tiny and fast and changing. Okay? Yep. So the vast majority of the power in that art is upper body. Okay? It can still be called an internal art, but the power gets stronger as you go up, not as you go down. Okay? Taiji Chuan is a sinking art. Yeah. Taiji Chuan is a sinking art. The power starts in the feet. It's built in the legs. It's the gearbox is at the waist and all this. Without sinking, it's nothing. But Taiji Chuan is a triangle or a pyramid. The power is less as you go to the top. So, or not power, but the heaviness. It's heaviest at the bottom and lightest at the top. Baguazhang is upside down triangle. Heaviest at the top, lightest at the bottom. Okay. So that's a striking art, a top heavy art with a very fast mobility. Baguazhang is basically a mobile rocket launcher. Okay? Right? It's like what they call HIMARS, right? The truck can drive around anywhere it wants and then launch a big missile. Okay? Other arts aspire to that. Baguazhang's very good at it because it's a super mobile rocket launcher. So the rockets are nasty and the truck is fast. Okay? But it's like, put it this way. If you compare it to Taiji Chuan, the Baguazhang is like what are those called? The Hummers, the Humvee, the military vehicle, the Humvee. The Humvee's fast and nimble. It's basically taking the HIMARS rocket and you're putting it on a Humvee. The Humvee's very nimble, it's very fast, but the rocket's too damn big. Okay? So the car is very quick and very nimble, and the rocket is very big. So it's not exactly super stable. Okay? Taiji Chuan, the rocket is smaller and the truck is huge. So if we don't hit you with the rocket, we're going to run into you with the bus. Okay? These are different. They're different qualities, and I'm not here to tell you which one to like. They're all fun, okay, and they're all great in their own way, but they're different arts. So I went and I absorbed what I could with Baguazhang, but I was already married to Taiji Chuan, and I went back to that. When I trained Bagujang, I also dropped everything and did whatever he told me to do, and smashed my way silly for a while. When I went to Chenyu, okay, I'll just say this: training with He Zhibao, it's you're just going to get hit in a bad way all the time, and we did a lot of striking, and it was a lot of fun. It was very interesting, and I could see how it intersected with Tuisho and all that. But I kept that stuff to myself. You know what I mean? I had 6-7 years behind me, and I liked him a whole lot. He was very good to me, and I learned a lot from him, a lot. But I don't practice Bagujang in any purity. I don't practice at all now, and I found where these roads intersected, and how what he taught was applicable to other things. And I just kept it to the vest, because as far as I'm concerned, he's the teacher, I'm learning, and I'm just going to take what he's learning, and I'm not there to, I don't like to go to teachers and talk about other teachers, and say, oh, I learned this. What about this? I didn't do that. I just let him teach, and I went along with what he was teaching.
Yep.
And that worked out real well for me. I got no complaints about that. It was very interesting. And I'll get into that later. I'll stop right there on that one. So going to Chenyu, Tuisho with Chenyu. If we say that Feng ZhiQiang was the ocean, Chenyu is the great white shark.
Mm.
Okay, you see what I'm saying? Chenyu is Chenyu is a predator. So playing Tuisho, and I did a lot of Tuisho with Chenyu. Now, how to describe this? It would be different coming from different people. Chenyu weighed a lot more than me. He was quite thick when I learned from him. He was kind of overweight. He was heavy, but he wasn't fat like a soft fat person. He was like somebody who had an 18-wheeler truck tire around him. He was hard. He was fat and hard. And heavy, very heavy. And just, he was one of these guys that you look at him and say, oh, he's fat, but he was very in shape. A guy that could drink and smoke and be overweight, eat a lot, and be incredibly in shape and very strong. And so, I'm not a big guy. I'm like 5'5", and I'm not very heavy, and I've never been very thick muscularly, and he's like a lot bigger than me. So doing Tuisho with him, again, I approached him with respect, reverence even. And when I did Tuisho with him, it was in the capacity of learning. And usually it was in the capacity of him using me to teach others. If I was lucky enough to be like picked up, be the dummy for him to Tuisho with, there was a reason for it. There were a lot of reasons for it when that happened. But, it was like every time I got up to touch hands with them, there were people watching, even if there was just one or two, there's other people there. I wasn't dumb enough to try to Tuisho with him alone. That's bad news. Like if they're watching, it's instructive. If it's me and him, he could be easily offended. I'm staying out of that. Plus, what does he need to Tuisho with us for? He doesn't need to. It's either teaching or nothing. It's not like we're like hanging out, oh, let's Tuisho together. I'm nobody. He's somebody. He doesn't need to Tuisho with me. So in a teaching context, I'm up there. There's other eyes watching, and he knew my history. When he took me as a disciple, he knew that I had studied with Chen Jinghong, who he didn't like, and he probably thought Chen Jinghong sucked. And according to him, maybe he was right from his perspective. Because he's Chen Zhaokui's son. He's like, who's this idiot? He didn't like him. He didn't like his character. But he also knew that I learned from Feng ZhiQiang. And even though he might have had his little disputes with Feng ZhiQiang is like his uncle. And so you can be mad at somebody, but when they're in your orbit as a family, they're still family. And Feng ZhiQiang was also incredibly famous. And when I went to learn from Chen Yu, he wasn't famous. So he knew my history with Feng ZhiQiang, and he was like, oh, this is good. I poached a student from Feng ZhiQiang. So, he was pretty happy about it.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like I had like 7 years of experience. So in his mind, I know a few things. He's not intimidated by me. I'm small, and I'm nobody. But he also knows that I know a few things. So when I'm up there doing tuition with him and he's teaching, I made a special effort to communicate non-verbally that like, hey, I'm going along with you. You know what I mean? Because you don't get up there with your who knows you learn from other people who are more famous than them and try to issue them some kind of challenge. Even if it's not an open challenge, even if you give them a force that they're not expecting. If he's trying to teach something, I could have easily been stupid enough when he's like, okay, if you're in this position and you're doing this, and he's talking and he's teaching about something, I could have easily put a little force into a spot which would have disturbed his action, just to let him know that I could. Right? Hey, I know this, right? I could get you here, or I could get you there, or, something like that. Anybody can do that when somebody's talking, somebody's teaching. You can always find a little weakness. If you have 7 years of experience with actual tuisho, with people who know something, you can find a little spot in there. Even if the guy's, if I was dumb enough to do that, that would have gone real badly. So I was up there communicating, all right, I'm your student and I'm going along with what you're doing. Because it would have been annoying for me to, to even just little glimmers of like, this guy's trying to resist me. This guy's trying to show me that he knows something. That's for the dumbasses. That's what you do when you're just an idiot looking for trouble. But I wasn't. I was pretty well versed in what was going on. So I'm going along with it, and sometimes I would show him, he would teach a certain application. And while he was doing it, I would tweak it a little. I would apply a little force, like as a message to him that I knew an option from this position, which was more like a cue to say, it could go this way. Now you can teach this. You can teach what to do about this. But it was like, it's in a special way, knowing how this stuff goes. Like if he's taking me down, if he's locking me or something, and he's not being super mean, right? He's being a little bit less than murdering me. Okay. So, and when you do that, when you don't go 100% on somebody, it's quite common that it doesn't totally work, like you're sort of taking it easy. So I want to I want to help make it work. But maybe it trails off a little bit. And so I show, okay, here could be the response. Since it didn't lock totally this, I could respond a little here to give him the option to lock it again, to do the next one. And so I'll play along because I know the pattern. So to a certain degree, my experience was helpful at that time because I knew things that the crowd around me didn't. Some of the beginner students didn't. And I had had experience with Feng ZhiQiang and others. So I could kind of play the fruit of the pattern. I could let it play out and then take it a little further. And he, of course, knows that stuff. So I'm giving him a cue. Hey, go take me out this way. Use me this way. Use me that way. So that was a lot of the capacity at which I did these training type of tuition with him. But there were other times when, it's just, he just wants to teach an application. So he's like, all right, come on, push me here or put your hands on me here. And I would. And he's like, no, that's not, no, you got to go for it. Let's have some power now. And he would laugh at me like, what are you doing? And so, okay, he makes me go for it. As soon as he makes me go for it, I'm eating the dust. And he's really, it really hurts. He liked to do that. He was he was nasty. So, the applications are very, very intense. And I just got used to eating the bitter. And you've done that for a while and, you just get, that forms the relationship where you're scared of your teacher. You're scared to touch. So I was definitely at that point where I was just like, this isn't fun, but I'm going to go back and do it every time, and pushing with him was, it was like, okay, I'll go pop culture on you. Everybody's seen Lord of the Rings, right? And, the desolation of Smaug, The Hobbit, the desolation of Smaug. So he goes into the cave, right? He's trying to find the Arkenstone. He's sifting through all the gold, right? And he's like, I can't find anything in here. And he sits down, and the mountain of gold that he sits down on starts moving, right? Like, oh, this is bad. It's like somebody thought they're sitting on a tree stump in the Amazon. It's like, oh no, that's a crocodile, honey. And so pushing with him was like, you'd put your hands on there and you'd push, and it was like, okay, it's a mountain. It's an immovable mountain. Oh shit, the mountain's moving. So it's like you're pushing on something that's very heavy, and then suddenly there's like 2 or 3 mountains, and they're all moving, and it's like, no, I didn't want to stand on that, and then you're gone. It's like you shouldn't have put your eggs in that basket. You shouldn't have put your force on that spot. First, you couldn't push it; it was a mountain. Then you dug into it and tried to lean into that mountain, put some force into that mountain. Then the mountain moved. It didn't stop being a mountain. It just moved while being a mountain. And that's a real problem. When it's that heavy and it's moving. And then you're like, oh, I shouldn't be in this spot. I should get out of this spot and go to some other spot. And as soon as you try to slip, suddenly you're locked. And now you're screaming and saying, please, please, please to the teacher, because you're about to go to the hospital. It's really that bad. You're like, screaming, but you can't say anything. Because me as a 徒弟, the way it was, it's like that thing where you open your mouth and no scream comes out. Well, in this case, it wasn't that I opened my mouth and no scream comes out. It's that I was willing to go to the hospital for the training. So, I will take the injury. So I was on the edge of serious injury most of the time, especially when he's teaching locking. I was in the injury zone the entire time. I said nothing. I said nothing, and I just sit there and let him do it. What could I do? I was locked. But I also, it's like, that's the way you keep a relationship with somebody like that, who is a martial artist foremost and teacher second, is, if they're going to teach you those applications, you're going to take it.
Yeah.
If you're 徒弟 in China, if you're 徒弟, you take it. 徒弟is disciple. If you're disciple, you take it without complaint. If he breaks your arm, that's the day. If he breaks your hand, that's the day. If he breaks your leg, that's the day. This is what you signed up for. So, he took me to the edge of great injury many times and held me there, and I didn't say a damn thing because I was mature enough not to complain. And, there's a lot of things that I did without complaint in that relationship. The tuisho was not fun and incredibly thrilling. I left class every day with my hands swollen, my joints swollen, actually swollen. And I mean, he was incredibly strong and incredibly fast and rather merciless. So, and at the same time, he was jovial and, paternal. He looked at his disciples like pets or adopted sons. And so, he would call us up and demand us to go wherever at any time. And we would have to show up, and then he would make us go drink with him. And, if it was your time to puke your guts out, so be it. Keep drinking, we had to go drink with him. We had to go train with him. We had to go translate for him. That was it. You were at the beck and call during those days. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. That's what I signed up for from the beginning. I paid my dues by doing that. But yeah, tuition with him was different. And he was exceptionally talented at joint locking, Qinna. He was great at all the applications he taught, and they were just very, very heavy. So he was a guy, when I said Feng ZhiQiang felt heavy and relaxed, Chenyu was heavy and heavy. It doesn't matter if he relaxed or not, he would crush you like a boa constrictor. And he was just heavy in all directions. He would put his weight on you, he'd put his strength on you, he would crush your joints, fast and vicious, right? And then he would sweep you and throw you, where you would just suddenly see the sky and your feet in it. That was the portrait. Your feet and the sky, And it's like, I'm not supposed to be seeing this view, and you'd be gone and you'd fall hard, just hard. I had PTSD after a while. I took mad throws from people, and we used to practice on, concrete tiles. So, it was hard knocks. And then he would teach you hitting. He had the pattern from Sanshou to Tuishou, but he would start by teaching hitting and he would stop. So that's the difference. Is Chen Yu would show you a glimmer of it, and then he would close the vest. And there was a lot of reasons for that. There were students who had been after him to learn hitting, fighting, young students who the testosterone was up and they wanted to learn fighting. And he figured something out, which is that, his father was very famous and he had a famous family name to uphold, and people were gunning for him. They were looking to topple him to make themselves famous. And that if he was openly teaching, like Tuishou and form is okay and applications is okay, but fighting with hitting, if that stuff gets out on video that you're doing that, and if people know that you're doing that, then the jianghu is going to come looking for you. The rivers and lakes, the people that want to make a name for themselves, and they don't care if they hurt you, and they don't have any manners. They don't have any wude. They will come looking for you because you've just shown you took that out of the can there, and you're showing that hitting now. Now you claim you're a fighter. I'm going to take you on, and all those people would have come looking for him, and he just couldn't afford to do that as the son of Chen Zhaokui, because the truth is Chen is very smart, and the truth of that situation, which is different than the macho sort of immature people like to illustrate it as. The truth is, as we know from any competition fighting, the champion of anything can lose on any given day, right? You can win today, lose tomorrow, Someone like John Jones could win today and have his arm broken on the next day. At the top, there isn't a great division between skill levels. So if somebody halfway good were to come to him and say, I'm going to challenge you, he would have to maim them. I know from personal experience, and also Chen Yu is not super tall, he's taller than me, but he's probably 5'8", he's just strong and heavy. But I know from being the small guy in most situations, with having a lot of students that have come to me, if somebody comes to you and they're significantly big and strong, as a smaller person, you're not going to win, manage, or even survive that situation by being polite. If the guy has more strength than you, and they have range and size on you, and they're more motivated to win than you are, you're going to have a problem. If you try to be polite and say, "Oh, I gotta be legal, and I gotta be polite and have wude. I have to have manners here and be civil." If you're going to be civil with that guy who comes to look for you, you're going to be in the hospital. Because the thing is, you're going to be civil, but all they can see is the dollar signs. They want to make themselves famous, and they're willing to hurt you to get it. They don't care. There's a lot of psychos out there that want to come gunning for people. They don't care. They don't even know the limits of their own strength. If they haven't been well trained in martial arts, that's even worse. If they're not well trained, you don't know the limits of their strength, and they don't know the dangers of what they're doing. So, there's been a lot of times where people came to me, students, and they wanted to have a little go, and they're almost always bigger than me, because being bigger than me is the smallest achievement in human life. You just be slightly full grown and you're bigger than me. So, they're always going to be bigger than me. And then they want to have a go, and they don't know anything. So the first thing you do is they put all their weight on you. And when somebody puts all their weight on me, all I do is release it into a bad place, And the problem is, when somebody who doesn't know their ass from their elbow comes and puts all their weight on you and you release it, they get hurt. And you get sued. That's the way it goes, Right. You want to get sued for some stupid beginner student, That's dumb. So at a certain point, I just stopped doing that. I don't touch hands with people who don't know what they're doing, or I don't have a reason to be touching hands with them, because I've been across hands with too many aggressive people. So, Chen Yu is smart enough to understand this, that if someone was to come to him with a challenge and and they kind of go crazy on him because they want to topple him to get the crown, right? To take that family name down. If they go crazy on him and he simply lets them hit empty and they break their face, he's going to have legal problems, you know? And then, and not only legal problems, but social problems, because that guy, people rarely ever admit defeat. Okay. If they came to you with bad intentions and they lose, they don't go, "Oh, sorry, my bad." They don't do that. You know, I mean, I can't tell you the number of people. Oh, geez. I'll tell you a funny one. If you have time, are we pressed for time? Or are we all right?
Yeah, we're good.
You know, we're yeah.
These usually run long when people interview me, so it is what it is. But I had one guy came to me in the early days. He was a Thai guy from Thailand, and he was big and fat, like actually fat. Okay. He was probably 5'7", a little taller than me, but just really big and heavy. And he was not in shape. His legs were weak. And I was trying to get him to train, you know, to sit into his legs and eat some bitter. And every time I'd make him sit down, he would pop right back up. You know, I'm like, no, you got to sit down in this drill. Your legs are going to hurt. You're going to have to sit down, bend your knees, you know, and bend your knees, pop back up. And I'm like, no, you got to bend your knees. And I'm like, do you understand why you need to bend your knees? I mean, we need to have a little talk here. You need to bend your knees, sit your weight down. And he acted like he understood, and then he would just pop right back up. I said, okay, I'm going to explain this to you. And I said, come here, we'll do a little tuition. The guy's much heavier than me and bigger. And in fact, he had some experience with some weird style. I don't know what it was. Some type of style, right? And as usual with one of these styles, his head was full of ideology from his teachers, you know. And I don't know why he came to me. That's not my problem. But you came here, I'm going to try to teach you, you know. And so I showed him, I just said, okay, push me. I did fixed step tuition. We call it dingbu tuition. I just said, fixed step tuition. I said, don't walk, don't step. You just try to make me move, okay? And I'm going to make you move. And then you're going to understand why you need to sit down into your legs, okay? And so I said, push me. And he pushed. Of course, nothing happened. He couldn't do anything. He's much heavier, but he couldn't do anything because I'm used to it. You know, I can take heavy people. And so I said, push. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't move me. And then I sit there and say, okay, push again. I said, push hard. He pushed real hard. And I just like turned my body, you know, moved the angles over to the side and made him dance. Like he takes like 5 steps and then trip and fall. Okay. And he's on the ground, and I'm saying, see, you need to sink into your legs so that when I move you, you can sit your weight down. You don't have to lean on me, you know? And here he is on the floor, and he gets up and he goes, but. He goes, that's not right. I said, what do you mean it's not right? He goes, you didn't use Lu. You see what I'm saying?
Man.
So in his mind, no Taiji was going to be correct if I didn't use yielding, what he thought was yielding. But you know, Taiji's not about yielding. Taiji's about winning. Okay? Taiji's about self-defense. Yielding is one part of the package. You don't just endlessly yield. I mean, you know, Taiji Chuan, Chen Taiji Chuan also has like hitting, okay? And if I punch you in the face, my fist isn't yielding. Your face is, you know? So Taiji Chuan's not all about yielding. It's about all kinds of things, all right? Yielding is but one part of it. And he was defeated easily, and then said, no, it's not right because you didn't use this way or that way. And that's what people do. Often when people have their ego invested in their ideology, they can be defeated, and they're not about to like say, oh, geez, I was defeated. I'm sorry. You're right. They're going to create a reason for why they weren't defeated. It's always that way. There's always some stupid reason why you're wrong and they're right. If their mind wasn't open, if they weren't really there to learn, you know, they're going to create a bunch of rationalizations why you're always wrong and they're always right. So it's like that, you know. If somebody was to come to Chenyu and, you know, issue a challenge and say, oh, you're teaching hitting, I'm going to hit you, or any kind of challenge. If they go to challenge him with that big family name and they put their weight on him, they put their strength on him, or they go crazy and try to hurt him, all he has to do is get out of the way of that stuff, redirect that stuff a little bit, and that guy falls and hurts himself. And what's he going to do? He's going to get up. He's going to go on the Chinese internet and say, this guy with the famous father, he hurt me. He has bad morals. He has bad manners, and he's too crude, right? He can only hurt people. He can't gently manipulate them. His Taiji Chuan is low level, right? That's the game that people will play. And he's smart enough to know that. So when it comes to things like hitting and all that, he'll allude to a little, teach a little bit of it, and then break off. Because he's like, I'm not going to promote this out to the public to advertise to all these like aggressive, pretenders to fame to come looking for me and, have a fight.
Yeah, for sure.
He was smart enough to know that by the time I was with him. I'm imagining he'd been through it already.
Right.
But he had the path. He has the path from Tuishou to Sanshou, absolutely, to applications. He has all that stuff. So in my view, I would say Feng ZhiQiang and Chen Yu were like, Feng ZhiQiang was older generation. And he had some other arts in there, like Liu He Xingyiquan and Tongbeiquan. He had studied both of those, I believe. He had studied both those arts. So he had some other methods. Chen Yu was pure Chen family, indoor family Taiji Chuan. And his approach was different. I would consider that the most pure of all the teachers I learned from, the most accurate as to the Chen style. So Tuishu with him was just kind of a horrible experience. It's just but a really wonderful experience, but terrifying, definitely terrifying. His strength was a big problem. His strength was overwhelming, and he liked to use it. And it was not a normal strength; it was a compound, a spiral, integrated strength. A lot of internal action going on there. And it was just not nice to be on the other end of. It was not what people imagine a soft art is like. It's sort of like saying, the whole Bruce Lee thing when they say, be like water, and then they say Taiji is like, the flow of water and all that. It's a soft art yield. But, water isn't soft. Okay, so people talk about water, excuse me. People talk about water being fluid and yielding and soft. But, those people who go, to San Francisco to try to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge to kill themselves learn pretty quick that at that height it's not yielding at all. They try to jump into the water and they shatter their legs from the foot up to the hip because water can't yield at that speed. So when you jump from a height into water, it's like jumping onto concrete. When a tsunami hits, a building, there's nothing soft about it. It smashes everything in its path. So in that light, water and fluid and Taiji and smooth, Chen was like that, where, okay, it's soft and it's kind of, yielding. It's not yielding. It's like you yield into something that crushes you immediately. It smashes, crushes, compresses, twists, breaks. It's not soft. It's fluid, but heavy. Okay? Fluid, grinding, and twisting and heavy. That would have been Chen Yu. And Jean Chen did not have that. That was not in his technology. He was a much softer version. Feng ZhiQiang had strength. And he had those applications, but he was a more expansive approach. And because it was sort of less pure to that style in a way, and, maybe the time period that he learned from Chen FaKe, it was just a bigger, more stretched out version of things. And by the time I got there, he was also stretched out further due to his interest in the Hunyuan Taiji. And, because he had learned other arts, he liked to hit people. So I think with him, it was like Tuisho, right? And lock and then smash you onto your face, onto the ground and throw you. He had a lot of techniques too. But the other part is like, I wasn't with Feng ZhiQiang for that long and he was already in his 70s while I was with him. So I can't really critique it. I can say what my experience was, but it was an experience due to the time period and my status as well. In Chen Yu's situation, I was a new student. I was like 30 years old in that time period. And so I was healthy enough, and he was young, and he was not famous, and so he had plenty of people to burn. He could just burn the students, run through them, twist them up, hurt them, make a show out of it. He was like, he had a lot of energy, And that's a difference between, meeting students when they're older versus when meeting teachers when they're older versus when they are younger and in their prime. I met Chen Yu kind of in his prime, and he was just ready to go. So I really was exposed to everything, Feng ZhiQiang was like past his prime, and he'd already taught plenty of people, and I wasn't important. So there's your question. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, we've been chatting for quite a while, and I'm definitely running out of battery on my phone here. So I definitely could talk to you for another hour for sure, because I have some other questions. But I appreciate everything that we've had a conversation about, all the insights you've given us. I really appreciate it. So thank you. Thanks for coming on, and thanks for being on the show.
Well, thanks.
It was amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And if you guys have more things and you want to do a number 2 sometime, you're always welcome.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. I'll probably take you up on that, because I definitely have some other questions that I'd love to hear your answers to.
Yeah, so. I hope I didn't run too long on this, and maybe there's other things I would have liked to talk about too, but we kind of went back into the time machine, to be honest, I'd like to talk about the history, but I'm much more interested in my time from Chen Yu forward, and then what I've done with it and what I am doing. We haven't touched on that, but that's, maybe for another time.
That's number 2.
That is number 2, and that's definitely where the rest of my questions are. So
that's mine too.
Great synergy there. So I appreciate it, and thanks again. And we'll reach out, and we'll get we'll have a second session sometime next year.
All right, that sounds great.
So thanks again, Marin. I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks, guys.
Have a blessed night. Be safe.
You too.
Bye-bye.